Thank you, Maria. Well, it is now time for our weekly political segment, KVUE Face Off. Joining us this morning is Tara Pohlmeyer from Progress, Texas, and Matt Mackowiak, chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so big hearing happening this afternoon in San Antonio about an issue that many thought was already resolved, but it's come back again. So there was a lawsuit regarding being able to register to vote in Texas whenever you renew your driver's license. As most people know, you are able to fill out the form online, but you then have to print it out and mail it in. There was a lawsuit about this last year, saying that this was disenfranchising voters. It's come back around this time around. Terry, give us a little bit of the backstory about who filed the lawsuit.
Yes, so the Texas Democratic Party, in collaboration with a lot of other really great national organizations, have filed this lawsuit again. This is the latest chapter in the fight for voting rights here in Texas. And so, as we've seen and as we heard just from you, this is about an arbitrary requirement where instead of hand signing or using a wet signature on an application, some folks have been using a digital signature and their voter registration applications were rejected. This affected thousands of Texans and kept a lot of them from accessing the polls. So as a voter registrar myself, sometimes, you know, like I do see folks like fill it out and have to sign it, and then we turn those into the county. There is no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that online. To remedy all of this, we are looking at the state of Texas needing to enact online voter registration. Almost 40 other states have done this, and there's no reason why Texas shouldn't be in the 21st century.
You know, online voter registration, Texas is one of the handful of states that doesn't have it. In recent history, every legislative session, there is a bill filed to do this, but it never moves. Matt, there's a lot of objection about this on the Republican side. Why is that?
Well, in the initial lawsuit, the reason it was that it failed is that it failed on a technical basis. You have to have standing to sue, and the individual who sued was able to go ahead and re-register.
Right.
I think 10 days after the lawsuit was filed, so it wasn't much of an injury, and they were able to re-register and go ahead and vote in future elections. In this case, I guess this person says he's going to move again in the future.
So, yeah, he has moved. He moved to Houston, out of the area, and then updated his driver's license, but knowing about the lawsuit, did not register to vote.
And so the question is, is it a significant burden to require an actual signature rather than a digital signature? The Attorney General's office has said that there are technological and security concerns related with doing this entirely online. Democrats talk all day about how our elections are being interfered with by foreign governments and cybersecurity concerns, yet they want to move everything to the internet. And so I think there's a disconnect there. But look, we'll see. This was ultimately, I think, ruled in favor of the plaintiff at the lower court level. It was overruled at the Fifth Circuit level. It's going to go back to the Fifth Circuit eventually. And so we'll see what the ultimate decision is. This is not about initially registering. You can initially register when you go to get a driver's license. It's about when you move. And so the question is, when you move, should you be able to do that entirely online as it relates to voting? Should we have a higher standard for voting? A person's probably not going to go online and put in a false address for moving for their driver's license. There's really no benefit to having a false address. In the case of voting, it would make voter fraud more easy to do. And so that's the concern. The concern is, should we have a higher standard for voting?
Do you feel like we don't have measures in place then, Tara, to prevent people from being able to, use this for nefarious reasons?
Oh, absolutely, there are measures in place. Again, almost 40 states have enacted online registration, and it has been extremely effective for their governments. What we have seen is that there is really no reason why Texas should be last on so many lists, and I really hope that Texas is not last when it comes to online voter registration. We have the highest uninsured rate. Our governor has now made us the only state to reject refugees, and online voter registration is one thing that we could not be last in. Representative Celia Israel from here in Austin did propose a bipartisan bill during the last legislative session to enact this, and we'll be fighting during the next session to make sure that it gets passed.
Yeah, obviously we anticipate that, even though, it's very likely that the judge is going to rule on this the same way that they ruled during the first one, but again, it'll go back up to the higher court. Do you think the higher court will it stand?
This is a case when it comes down to voter suppression, and are we blocking folks from exercising their constitutional right to cast a ballot? In this case, we are. Some folks were not allowed to cast a ballot in the 2018 election because of this broken process. So as we move forward, we need to ensure that we protect the voting rights and that we make voting accessible to all Texans in the future.
Especially as we're moving forward to an election, you know, the deadline to register to vote for the primary is coming up quickly. It's Monday.
It's on Monday.
We always hear this kind of these differing views. You hear Democrats say everything in Texas is about voter suppression, and we hear Republicans say no, there's voting fraud and there are people voting who shouldn't be. Matt, how do you weigh that out?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the state should be able to set its own laws as it relates to voting, and in this case, the federal government they're trying to get the federal government involved. So I think there's a real concern there. The feds don't need to be setting rules for states. But what I would say is, you know, it's just hard to take a lot of these complaints seriously by Democrats, because just a couple of years ago they were saying voter ID would be a disaster for the state of Texas. It wasn't a disaster. You've had almost no complaints whatsoever. And in fact, it was ruled constitutional by the courts after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit from the Democrats. Look, the Texas Democratic Party is effectively a plaintiff lawyer full employment society, basically. All they do is sue. And so they made a lot of these same kind of claims about voter ID. They didn't come to pass. They haven't admitted they were wrong. They haven't said anything about it. And so in this case, all it's saying is that if you're going to move your address, you have to print out a form, sign it, and send it in. To me, that's a reasonable burden, that we should have a higher burden for people to vote and to make sure that they're doing so with integrity. But again, the court will decide, and now that they've addressed the standing issue, they can address the underlying constitutional issues.
All right, unfortunately, that is our time. That hearing is set to happen at 1:30 this afternoon. Of course, there'll be updates on it throughout the day. We thank you both for joining us this morning, and we'll be right back.